the reason why this is getting so much national attention, people are kind of putting it out there and getting on people, is because like we want them to be held accountable. Like it's as simple as that. It's a simple fact that, you know, we keep seeing this thing like repeat itself, and you know, like cops are literally getting away with murder, and the evidence is there. You're seeing the video footage, and you know, they get acquitted, they don't get charged, or they just get fired, or it's just a slap on the wrist. And it's just like we just got to be the ones to keep pressing it and keep showing it and keeps, you know, using our voice until it gets to a point where, you know, they're actually being held accountable. And it just kind of makes I get frustrated when people try to, you know, counteract that point with, you know, well, what about, you know, blacks killing other blacks in their community? They got to figure that out. And it's just like, yeah, when a black person kills another black person, they get 25 to life. You know what I mean? Like, they're held accountable for what the actions that they do. We're simply saying, you know, there's no reason why an unarmed black person, you know, who's getting arrested for something, whether they did it or not, it shouldn't end in a fatal shooting and a fatal death, you know? So that's kind of the goal with everything.
So I think that, well, I can't speak on behalf of everybody, but I think that just having this explosion in social media support, that alone has caused people to rethink their past decisions and their past mindsets. And it's really caused a lot of people to change. And now I feel like a lot more people are getting on the same page as those who already supported the Black Lives Matter movement. And because of this influx in people who are changing and getting on the same page as us, it's really just almost snowballing into something bigger. Like, I don't think that we can ever go back to how things were a week ago even. I think that the only way forward now is to actually create change, and that can start in your own organization, your workplace, your school, even just around the people around you, and speaking up for Black people and other people of color. I think that's where we're going. Like, there's no way, it's almost stigmatized now to be, I guess, covertly racist and overtly racist as well. But I don't think we're ever going back to what it was before. Like, we're only going forward from here.
Yeah, so I'm actually impressed, as well as, I in a sense, personally, I'm elevated in a sense by all of the support online. So with the social media campaigning, and at least for me personally, sharing and tweeting and sharing stuff on Instagram, really highlighting this kind of injustice that has been systemic for years, right? Along with police brutality, as well as within the systems of anything, sport, schooling, etc. These social campaigns really bring to light kind of overall racism, especially in the Black community, but as well as in other marginalized groups, right? So the goal out of all of this, at least for me personally, it's really just to start the conversation, because social media is like surface level, right? It's kind of the first step to, one, bring awareness as to why is this a movement? Why is this something that is being talked about, rippling through the country, rippling through the states, and obviously the world. Clearly a needed conversation, because we start to realize, or at least in the allies I've spoken to, they're realizing how little they knew about the history, how far back it goes, and how little has changed, or if there is progress, the number of steps that often go back. You know what I mean? So it's really just bringing this to the forefront, having these conversations, making people realize that privilege is one thing, being an ally is another thing, being actually educated on the topic is something else. And when we look at social media, its beauty is that it reaches a number of people. It gets conversation going. We also learn who essentially isn't a part of this, who doesn't understand or realize their privilege, doesn't understand what their impact is in the movement, don't support it. We obviously see that as well, but also you see the number of allies. And I think the big thing that comes out of a movement such as this is the fact that people are cluing in, hey, I really know nothing. And this is kind of a stepping stone to pushing people to learn more, and why they want to be not only an ally for the Black community, but other marginalized groups. So I think that's that's the main thing right now with the social media campaigning and people talking, people sharing, me personally sharing, because my experiences obviously isn't felt by everyone, but can be just by sympathizing and understanding that people have different upbringings, they dealt with different cards, and unfortunately skin color is one of them. And being your background is a part of that, and the history and the stereotypes that are associated with that really do shape people's perceptions of you, and the fact that it takes years for things to change. It's unfortunate, but I'm glad that the conversations are happening to the extent it is now, because clearly when we see lives are lost, there's an issue, obviously. Second, when people realize that they're ignorant, that's important, because now you're going to be able to understand what other people are, where they're coming from, and why these issues exist. So that's what I would have to say to social campaign. I think it's the first step, but next is the actual action, right? That's definitely the big conversation that kind of turned 3 days after the social media. And then we're seeing kind of the action take place with obviously the proper justice system coming into place with the arrest and actual charges on the cops involved with George Floyd's case. And then obviously bringing it to attention that there are other cases out there as well that really need justice. And I can go on about the criminal justice system in the States and how it is definitely against the Black community, and in certain states with very little Black community in those states, we see that they're actually representing most of those who are incarcerated. So it's really this conversation. It's brought more knowledge to me, as well as allies, friends that I've spoken to.
Just change, I guess, empathy and education, I'd say, just in terms of kind of educating, everyone about, sorry, the pupper came and said what's up. So I just say those three things. I really think the world needs change in terms of equality and getting away from this systemic and institutionalized racism, it could have been passed down generation to generation. It could have been taught in schools, who knows how it actually, populated this many people in the world, but it's still there. And I think empathy is another big one. I think having, white people and other privileged individuals kind of empathize and see the double standard. I think that's a big one. Just so, just so it's kind of apparent. They don't just get to close their eyes or turn a blind eye whenever things are, aren't sweet. And I think you kind of need to be held accountable for stuff like that. And just education, really. I think the biggest thing, the solution to everything is just having, everyone become more aware of the injustices and the oppression that are going on, and just kind of doing something about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy towards that, and the biggest thing was, using the hashtag BlackLivesMatter with that, because with the Instagram algorithm, when you type in that hashtag, then all you're gonna end up seeing is the black squares, and that's what a lot of people were saying. But the whole point of that was the fact that we're not posting anything about music. We're not posting barbecues. We're not posting selfies. Today is about posting things that can contribute to what's going on and raising awareness. So we're sharing things on our stories. We're sharing information. Take the time to actually educate yourself. And so a big thing that I was saying is, if the only source of information you were getting is from a hashtag on the Instagram Explore page, then you're doing this whole research thing wrong. If you have to do a research paper in school, you're not just going to use one source, all right? And the one source, you can't just go to one thing and expect that to be the most reliable source ever as well. You got to do your research and look at other things too, So I get you want access to information as fast as possible, and the fastest way to do that is through, typing in a hashtag. But, to think that, if that hashtag has all black squares, that you're not going to get information, that's just ridiculous. You're not looking hard enough. That's my stance on it. But I do think it was effective. Like, everybody got behind it, but the biggest issue, another big issue that I had, was people who just posted the black squares and said, check, I did my social activism for the day. And it's just like, if you're gonna do that, like, you might as well just not even post it, because that wasn't the point of the whole thing. So, you know, some people definitely got it misconstrued on what the reasoning behind it was. And if you were one of those people who just posted a square with no caption, no nothing, and didn't do anything else, it's like there's no point of that. And again, like, you don't have to be super vocal on social media. You could be doing things behind closed doors. We don't know what what conversations you're having and that kind of stuff, you know? So you can still be doing that and not be posting as much. Like, you don't know what other people are really truly doing, you know what I mean? So I don't want to like shame anybody or fault anybody for that, but it's just like, it's kind of, there's no point to just posting that. It was more than just the black squares, you know? So I just wanted to make that clear too.
Up until yesterday, there were some people who hadn't said anything on the matter, or, well, from what I know, had not posted anything else about what was going on in the media. And then all of a sudden they post this black square with a hashtag saying BlackOutTuesday. And for some people, I mean, that's probably not the extent of their activist work, but I know for others, that was definitely it. They just posted that picture and they were like, okay, that's enough for the day. I've hopped on the trend, I've shown people that I'm woke, but that's not it. You always have to back it up. There's always more that you can do. So for those people who did actually do more, signed petitions, donated, spoke up to their family and friends, like, those are the people who are really pushing this forward. And I definitely appreciate those people, especially even if they posted the black square. But it was a good idea. It was definitely a good idea and created a lot more awareness. We just need to make sure that that action is followed up with meaningful, like truly meaningful action.
I think it was an interesting perspective. I honestly woke up to it. I didn't really realize that this was something that was going to take place, a Blackout Tuesday. And I think the thought of silencing out all the other noise was super important, because now we're really bringing to the forefront why everyone is protesting, why everyone is sparking these conversations, why we really need to talk about the systemic racism, especially with the Black community as well as other marginalized groups. So that's important. Again, another thing was, hey, we might be actually silencing, the conversations we're already having by using the wrong hashtag. But I actually had a conversation with other people about this, especially in sports, about the fact that when there was this discussion about using the wrong hashtag, we started to realize that a lot of people are getting their information secondhand. They're getting it from social media. They're relying on that to stay educated. And I think that brought two things into the forefront. One, we can silence out the other noise and put some emphasis on the discussion that's at hand. And two, we really need to ensure that people are actually getting educated outside of things like Instagram Explorer or wherever the hashtag takes you, that there is resources online. You can start supporting writers and historians that work with the Black community. Also, our Black members who are artists or writers, that's a great way to really learn about the community, and it doesn't need to come from social media, but definitely being able to see kind of almost everyone that I am friends with posted, it really puts into perspective how many people are behind the movement.
It was an effective kind of strategy to force people to pay attention to the movement going on. I think it was a very impactful, and well-supported thing that, like, my whole timeline was just Black images with the hashtag BlackOutTuesday. Some people use BlackLivesMatter as a hashtag, but I saw a lot of stories where people were kind of correcting everyone and trying to free up that hashtag so that the people actually protesting and, putting in the actual work to kind of, promote equality. They're kind of getting filtered out with all the Black images and their voice isn't getting heard. So that was one of the little cons that I felt. It was, it wasn't as effective as it could have been, but I did feel like it was a successful social media kind of campaign where it did kind of still get its message across, but it's effective. It kind of ranges. If you want to, ask anyone about their opinion, I believe it kind of would range just on how effective it actually was. But I thought it was pretty effective. I thought, for the most part, a lot of people on my timeline or my feed that I didn't think would support this movement showed support. using the image. So I do think it was a very popular and widely accepted thing at the end of the day.
So I wouldn't consider myself an ambassador. Like, I wouldn't consider myself a social activist. I just, like, if I see something that I don't agree with, and I'm gonna speak up on it. You know, again, like, because I don't want to, you know, put myself in the same category as people who've been doing this for years, been studying every single case, who are there for every single protest and super vocal. Like, that's their life. You know, like, those people, you can consider them as ambassadors. I wouldn't try to, you know, put myself in that category. But at the end of the day, I'm a Black student who goes to a predominantly white school. Like, yes, I'm going to speak up about these things. And we have group chats with other Black students and other Black athletes on the team, you know, to talk about these issues, because sometimes it just feels like it gets kind of, you know, brushed under the rug, or it's not really brought up, and it feels like it kind of doesn't matter to everybody outside of us. So yeah, like, if I see something, I'm gonna post about it, I'm gonna talk about it. I wouldn't consider myself an ambassador, but, you know, like, if you want to see change, you have to kind of, you know, put actions to your words as well too. So
Yes, 100%. Even just, like, I was talking, there's one other woman in my program. She's in the cohort behind me, so she's just starting her internship now. And she's also a Black woman, but she's like me, she's half Black, half white. And there's one other Black woman in our program, but the two of us were talking about what really counts as activism for us as Black dietitians. And sometimes it's really just showing up and being a role model, a mentor, and just helping the people that we help. So me going in, and when I worked with Scarborough Center for Healthy Communities, I was working with a lot of people of color, and I felt like that was enough of an exchange to be considered activism, just showing up and being here. But also, as I mentioned before, you always have to follow it up. Like, there's always more work to do. So I do definitely consider myself an ambassador. I always have, but even more so now that I'm running my own private practice and I have more of a responsibility to do these things for my company. It's just gonna keep getting bigger. And yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think it gives me a platform of that I can use to talk and communicate with other young Black girls that are considering pursuing a career in a sport, or wanting to continue to play a sport in their post-secondary education, as well as being a student and pursuing a career in academia. Again, I've talked about that before, but being able to have kind of that as a foundation, it gives me something to talk about. So what I've noticed as an athlete, especially at Western, maybe it's similar in other places, but I honestly feel different sometimes. Even within my own team, I'm actually one of the few colored people or Black people represented on our team, and that improved significantly last year as well. We got a few more members who are also from the Black community, and that's what we need. We need that representation. We need those faces, or else how else are we supposed to inspire young kids to pursue that as well? People of color or Black kids as well, to be able to see themselves playing a sport, especially even as a woman.
I believe it's kind of my job to educate my followers, or like the people that follow me. I want to see my my posts, my content, I guess. I believe it's my job to kind of educate them from my perspective. The question you asked before, what you think will help change the most? I think empathy and education are like two of the main things. And that just goes to show, like, if I can, repost or just like highlight things that I want my followers, the people that look at my stuff to see, I definitely feel like I can advocate change that way effectively, and post things that people that aren't educated on the matter could see, and start questioning some of the actions they see in their lives, and I think change starts in slow beginnings, but then after you kind of have that snowball effect, or once everyone's kind of on board, and things start getting moving, then you'll just pick up momentum and it'll just keep going until, you crush the barriers that are in society right now. So, I believe as a Western football player, or just like someone in the community trying to make a difference, I think it's on me, it's on everyone else that represents something bigger than themselves to kind of band together and really kind of do what's right. And I think that's, at the end of the day, is really all society needs. People of all communities that, are leaders in their own way, whether it's through sports, through arts, through club association, through, just being someone in the community. I think it's kind of on everyone to do what's right in these times.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I'd be lying if I said we weren't. And the thing is, like, sometimes you think, oh, when you live in Canada, it's not as bad as the States or whatever. There's not a comparison of who has worse racism. It is the fact that it's there, and it's as subtle as walking into a store and getting more attention and eyes on you just because the color of your skin. You know what I mean? It's the fact that you walk into an interview and people are taken aback at how well spoken you are. Oh wow, you're so well spoken. Like, did you expect me not to be? Like, there's so much smaller things than just the fact of getting kind of like shot down just because of the color of your skin. There's a whole spectrum of racism. So to answer your question, yes, like me and my family members, to many certain extents on that spectrum, have been affected by this.
Yes, 100%. My dad and my brother, who are both Black men, my brother lives in Los Angeles, California, and my dad travels a lot to America to work. And they've dealt with it more than I have, like more overtly. My brother's been on a team with mainly majority white men who haven't really been around other people of color, and kind of shows. So I don't know if I want to get into specifics of my experiences, but just knowing their experiences alone is enough to make anybody second guess the way that they are conducting themselves in public. And then with my own experiences, just walking into a classroom, being the only Black person there, walking in anywhere, being the only Black person there, that's a little tough. Or having people undermine you, having people look over you simply because of the color of my skin.
I definitely have. Right. I come from a single mother household, and I'm half Black, so my mom's actually Indian. So her form of racism is different. Yet I share it as well because, again, I'm half Indian as well. So she has had her fair share of experiences of racism. I have had my own because I identify as a Black woman. I come across as that. So you see it in your relationships, especially when dating, especially in university. When I grew up in high school, I was actually very fortunate enough to not experience racism often, but I do realize now that I reflect the number of microaggressions that I actually was exposed to. And you kind of become numb to it, and it's something you don't respond to all the time, but it does add up, and you actually put into perspective the fact that technically I was being stereotyped in that moment. Not necessarily true. I've been to other parts, because especially as an athlete, you travel to all parts of Ontario and Canada to play sports, especially when I was playing volleyball. Sometimes I would go into an en route, which is a bit in a more emptier area of Ontario, for example, and you could tell it's for a smaller community. And I even had one person drive by and say, "Go back to your own country." And I'm like, I wasn't even doing anything. I was just literally driving. And they saw my skin tone and thought that was appropriate because they were frustrated about something completely different. And it always hits close to home because I'm like, oh yeah, I am different. I have to prepare myself to work harder for some of the things that I want to get or want to do just because I am a person of color. I'm a Black woman, and that's just the reality of things, especially when I'm wanting to pursue a career in academia as well as continue doing these things in sports. So I can definitely say that racism is something that I've become, unfortunately, I've become a bit numb to. But in the cases where language is inappropriate or it's very blatant, that's the time where I'm frustrated. I either speak up or it's something I have to reflect on and say, hey, is this the time and place to discuss this, or can I handle it differently and discuss with this person and have a positive conversation about something like that on the side, just because it is a delicate balance. And we always want to keep allies and we don't want to call people out all the time. So it's a balance of both, right? Yeah.
I went to a school in the U.S., private school for my last 2 years of high school, and I was just trying to, I was at a boarding school, you're constantly, in touch with your peers, and I was, beginning to be in a relationship with this, white girl at my school, and her parents kind of asked on Christmas whether, just little things about me. We didn't really have any photos together, so she had to explain it. And while she was explaining, the whole race question came up, and her parents were very disappointed and kind of, they quote said to her that they didn't think she had it in her to kind of do something like this, and really kind of burdened her that she was really making the wrong decision. And it all stems from like a really outdated, hateful kind of mindset that like a lot of Americans, in my opinion, may be subject to and may not be aware of. I'm not going to point fingers and say everyone there does, but it's definitely a very outdated kind of mindset that still plagues America, to be honest. And just kind of being subject to something like that, and her parents ended up burdening her to the point where she told me everything. And as soon as I read the text, like that was pretty much it with the relationship. I was one of the, I was in that situation, and as a Canadian, being like a foreigner into a private school in the US, like, I don't know, I've never been subject to any type of discrimination or racism in the sense of, in a relationship. Like I've been in, several, mixed, I guess, interracial relationships in Canada. So like when I came to the prep school, I was honestly just still focused on football and still focused on achieving my goals. But, I just had a class with her, we started, really trying to see if it was really realistic, and then that just kind of woke me up and made me realize that like there's more, there's more very embedded problems in kind of in the world. I can't just pinpoint America because racism happens everywhere, but there's really embedded and very hateful thoughts and inequality that plagues people's minds. And that was just really the first one that really got me aware of how, I could be in the same school as her daughter, very, reputable and prestigious prep school in the United States. And like, I could have earned my spot the same way she did, or I could have done more. And, it would have been for nothing because of just my skin color, and I really think that was kind of the main reason why I wanted to speak up when this revolution is going on now, because it could literally happen to anyone. Like anyone that doesn't resemble, like a normal white person is subject to injustices and just racism. Like it doesn't have to be just I know it happens predominantly to Black people around the world, but like I know people that, aren't Black, or, people of color that, people across, when they're walking down the street, they switch sides, like just little forms of, I wouldn't say like like little forms of discrimination and just like micro racism, I guess, where you're just like, you're not comfortable to just cross the street on the same time or same side as someone of color. So, there's endless examples I could talk about of the racist, injustices that I felt in my life. But I don't know, I think that one is a big one for me, just kind of, working my way to my dream and going to a prep school and continuing to better myself academically and athletically, just to kind of step outside of my comfort zone and be faced with some racism. It really shocked me. So I'd say that's my example of direct racism that happened to me. And I have screenshots of it still. Like I remember getting it on my iPhone 4, and as soon as I received the text, I just screenshotted it right away. Cause like this is one of the main forms of racism that happened to me in my life. So I definitely wanted to kind of record it. And, you know, even looking back on it, probably 6 years ago, it's still one of those things that just hits different every time I see it. And it happens to everyone, sadly. And, you know, who knows how the countless of many acts that have been similar to my situation or even worse that have happened, you know? So I think that's the main reason why, or one of the main reasons why this outdated, hateful kind of ideology is even a thing and needs to be changed, obviously.
I was just so appalled, and I wasn't the only one who spoke. Like, there was a lot of people who responded to this person. It's just the fact that, you know, you have Western who, you know, finally after a week, you know, post a statement about what's been going on, and then one of the first comments you see is someone saying, you know, don't make me pull my alumni funds. You know, like, this is a matter of Black people on Black people in their community or whatever. This is someone who's donating to our school, like, you know what I mean? So it's just like, and trying to use it as a threat of, like, I'll pull my money out if you don't stop talking like this. And it's just like, bro, nobody needs your money, nobody needs your handout. And it's just, I was just so taken aback that, you know, I know there's people who think like that, but to actually put it out there and have it on the internet, again, I don't know how credible this person is. I don't know if they went to Western or if they do donate, but at the end of the day, I know there's people who think like that. So I couldn't just see that and just kind of let that go. Like, he really felt so entitled to, you know, the fact that I donate money means that I have a say on, you know, how the stances that, you know, this university should take. And it's just, I couldn't let that one go. So I had to say something. And I saw a lot of people saying something like, keep your money, we don't need it or whatever. So shout out to all those people who said that too. But I was also saying to Western as a university to hold yourself accountable too. This, you know, I know there's a lot of donors. You don't need money from this person. So to accept money from someone who's clearly made their views and put it out there to the world, and you're gonna still accept money from them, then you're adding to the problem as well. So I was just very, very vocal about that, but I was just taking it back. But at the end of the day, it's like, that's the sad reality of how people actually, like, truly do things, you know? So
Well, I can tell you right away, right off the bat, as a PhD student in neuroscience, I think there's only three members of the Black community in that program. I can conclusively say that. So it's hard for me to find a role model or someone I can identify with, especially when I'm looking at faculty. It's really hard to find a Black woman teaching and educating in at least in my field of science at the faculty level. So finding an ally in that sense or a mentor in that sense is so hard. And we need more faces of color, especially from the Black community in academia, in order for a young kid to be able to say, hey, that's what I want to be. I want to be a scientist. I want to be able to teach and lecture at a university level, or I want to be a doctor. Again, there's so many programs that are starting to emerge to help support this. I've seen U of T's new program that is really encouraging more of the Black community to apply. And for example, I even was a mentor, part of this summer mentorship program at U of T as well when I was working there in Toronto. And then what they do is they try to get young youth in high school who are of Black or Indigenous descent to come out and actually learn more about science and have a project and experience what it's like to be in a career or research in STEM. And that's the stuff that we need to be able to find those mentors, to be able to encourage more people of color to actually pursue a post-secondary career and to really represent those individuals as well is really important. That form of like blatant, it was clearly racist tweets. Those are like shocking to the core, because it's like, where are you coming from to be able to say something like that? Do you not understand the gravity of the words you're using, especially as a student, especially as a member of an institution, and that institution also claiming that they want to encourage more diversity in their programs. They want to go against racism. They want to go against these injustices, support marginalized groups. It says, one, are we educating our student athletes enough about kind of, one, the history of any person of color in sport, the diversity of people of color, especially the Black community in sport, what that does. It says, are we educating each other enough? Were other people aware that this individual is clearly racist? Has anyone had that conversation with them? What was the response on social media at the time? And I think now, when we're seeing other individuals tweet or post things on social media that are clearly racist and actually speaking up to that, it says that people need to get a reality check. Like, you have to check your privilege, you have to check kind of where your history is and what other people's history is, and understand that racism it's literally human rights. So you can't and it's frustrating, because when you see it's a student athlete and these people have a platform where they're respected by either their fellow athletes or by the community, just because they're balancing both being a student and being an athlete and excelling in something, and to one tweet or share anything on social media that is clearly racist, it's disappointing. It's frustrating. Should we be supporting or allowing these students to, one, get scholarship and be leaders in our community? I don't know. That's where it really brings it into perspective, especially because they have such a big platform. Yeah, hypocrisy, that's the key word there. It really comes out. I don't think people are aware of what they've said in the past and what they're saying now, and how that is kind of a cycle. So one, she responded to LeBron's comments in a way that was clearly against what he was saying. And then this backed it up by saying that, hey, Drew Brees has the right to say what he wants to say. So it's really this full circle, kind of true colors come out when people start to speak up on certain comments. In this case, again, we're working with a lot of factors here, but we know that LeBron is from the Black community. We know that Drew Brees is not. Where's her support lying? For her, it may be subconscious. She's not realizing she has her own personal biases against people of color, her own internal racism, and can't admit it, especially because people are definitely calling her out on social media as well. So it says a lot. Hypocrisy is something that you, like, personally, I experience all the time. I'm like, you said something differently before, now you're saying this now. It's frustrating because, again, maybe if they took that in and found a new perspective, did their own history, their own research, understood why people were actually kneeling for the flag, maybe it would have changed things. But I don't know where her support's coming from, and her hypocrisy is clearly not just true to her, but to many individuals. Again, there's things that you start to realize the gravity of, especially now when we start having this dredged up support and people really criticizing in a way that is somewhat productive of what people are saying. And then actually, for me, when I've numbed it for so long, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is what we need. We need more allies to speak up, because clearly when sometimes someone from the Black community says something, it doesn't hit as hard. So that's what I have to say. Hypocrisy is just the key word. It's something that we experience all the time.
That's what I talk about when I say it's institutionalized. It's these people, this kind of racist inequality or unequal ideology. It stems from being taught and institutionalized in children at a young age. And then I think it's very, very, very dangerous in the sense that if people get power, so like someone was raised to be kind of racist and think like, a white person can get away with saying some things a black person can't. And like once they get a position of power, aka president of the United States or leading news reporter or, etc., their narratives and their agendas really get, put on for everyone to see. And just seeing how this reporter said that Drew Brees has entitled to his opinion when LeBron should just shut up and dribble, or, like just that type of hypocrisy that's what's just wrong with America. Like when you have someone influential as a reporter or even the president have this double standard and have this apparent, hypocrisy in terms of combating, social, this is like what society is like. So like when you see it firsthand and when the world's beginning to open their eyes on this kind of topic and everyone kind of sees how like the media is very, very vocal on what they want and what agenda they want to put out and how they kind of interpret all the news and like how LeBron can just say his 2 cents on an issue and just get told to shut up, or Drew Brees can hold some outdated ideology and be entitled to his opinion, so it really kind of shows that the real problem is so embedded in the world that like even in the United States specifically, like the problem isn't as shallow as we think. Like there's like 400 years worth of inequality in that country, so like having someone like Drew Brees say that he doesn't respect anyone that doesn't honor the flag or the national anthem. I forget the exact quote, but he more so was, a lot of people have that mindset because, a lot of, especially affluent white people in America that have relatives that might have fought in wars or the Revolutionary War or anything like that. It's a type of pride and it's a type of kind of tradition almost to have to celebrate, the bravery and to an extent, like that's just how they think. And, to have family that's served and, could have lost their life in a battle and, to return or even if they passed away in the battle, their legacy remains in their family's hearts. And for Drew Brees to say that, like, it really kind of undermines that whole other side of the equation where black folk at that time were forced to fight for a side that might even not have their best interests, a country that they could fight for and come back and still not have their full freedom. It shows the double standard of how, like, if life's sweet and you don't really see anything wrong, then like, why fix it type thing, So I think that's what Drew Brees he also apologized and his teammates kind of educated him on the sense of where he was wrong and how he can think differently. And I really think that, like, back to my previous point, that like education and empathy are among the main reasons and main things to kind of have change, which is like the last one that I said. So I really think that like a lot of white people in America or even around the world are people that are racist. I shouldn't even say white people. There's racist people that sadly aren't even white, so it's a global thing. I think the racists really in the news and influential positions are the ones that really push the agenda. And I think once we kind of regulate those kind of people first, I think the world itself would change rapidly in the process as well. And I think if change starts, those kind of things where Donald Trump could say that protesters in Minnesota are thugs and all the hoodlums. I don't even know the exact quotes he said, but his message got across is that these people are unequal than the ones that were protesting in Michigan or wherever they were protesting, where for haircuts and for being able to go to a recreational park or whatever they're arguing about during a global pandemic. So you know what I'm saying? Like it just kind of shows that like people in positions of power that have this kind of unequal mindset are the ones that are really, really pushing the agenda. And like, you know, LeBron's making like, honestly, like revolutionary action by being so vocal about stuff like this, and kind of having his following become aware, whether they like it or not. Like, and that's another thing. Like, people are standing up, whether the people that follow them like it or not. And like, I'm losing followers. I'm sure a lot of other people that are vocal about this are losing followers. And like, to be honest, like it's a good thing, you know. It's good to kind of, you know, filter out all the racists and the people that don't see things this way. And even if the posts or even the news kind of got to them, and they felt the injustices, and they felt the double standard, and they felt, you know, like how people are feeling, and how like Black people around the world are feeling, and they're combating this revolution head on, and they're taking, you know, what's right for them. And even if they don't like it, like they're gonna be subject to it in the future. It's one of those things where it's also the privilege that like they can choose what they want to see and how they can live their life, because like they have that privilege, you know. Like they can choose to ignore something like this and their life won't change at all, you know. Like, but going back to what you were initially talking about, I do think the hypocrisy is a bigger kind of systemic issue that is under the umbrella of this institutionalized racism.
Like it's not enough to just be an ally with, you know, with the Black community, and just stand by and say, I hear you, or whatever, like you guys do your thing. I'm not racist, but you know, you guys do your thing. Like it's not enough at this point. It's having those difficult conversations, and not just having, and it's taking the time to learn, understand why do we feel this type of way? Why do we feel so strongly about these issues, and trying to like really get a deep understanding. And then once you understand that, have those conversations, not just with us, but with amongst your friends, amongst your family, you know, because it's going to take more than just us to be having the conversation and be pushing the narrative. So you got to have those tough conversations, and then help in any way you can. If you're in a position where you can donate, you know, go, like you can do that as well. But you know, it doesn't have to come from money. Like it's simply as signing petitions and getting the word out, and just kind of supporting it, and not just doing it as a trend, but because you genuinely, you know, don't agree with what's going on and want to help out. I would say that's the biggest thing to do.
Well, again, signing petitions, attending protests, donating to organizations. I mean, I know a lot of people, because this kind of originated in America, there's a lot of, not people ignoring it, but there's not as much attention on the Canadian racism as well, including racism against Indigenous people and police brutality against Indigenous people. But there's also places in Canada that we can donate as well. So I think the next step, after you've signed your petitions, created awareness, and donated to the American organizations, you can start donating to Canadian organizations, maybe advocating in your workplace for boards and like diversity boards, diversity positions, because I seriously think that once everybody is liberated and truly has an equal shot at success, you know, the human race in itself is just going to be so much further ahead. Like the innovation is just going to skyrocket once everybody gets an equal chance. And, you know, it would be nice to have our Black men and women able to walk down the street or sit in their own house and not have to worry about, you know, being murdered by police officers.
So the next step is, I've posted about this on social media, is I think the one thing is really educating yourself, because yes, you can, for many, they understand that this is morally wrong. It's incorrect to be racist. It's incorrect for these injustices to happen to certain groups while not experiencing it yourself. But to understand where that's really coming from and how it's been a part of our history for a number of years, dating hundreds of years back, will really help put that into perspective, to actually allow you to kind of sympathize, put yourself in those shoes, to understand where you've kind of been lucky in a sense. Again, this idea of privilege, yet what I'd like to add is the fact that you are, or anyone who's non-Black or a person of color, understanding, one, maybe you've experienced your own forms of racism. Picture that in a group that experiences it all the time, or maybe you've had your own injustices and other things. How would you defend yourself in that situation? Why? And see why other individuals are doing the same for themselves. And remaining an ally. So finding ways to support. It's either joining an organization, supporting the Black community, either through businesses, through education, identifying your own biases, your own maybe internalized stereotypes that you didn't realize you had, seeing where that comes from and understanding that, that's super important. Again, educating yourself is key, and not everything has to be monetary if you're looking to support. Again, be invested in the movement, learn more about it, see ways you can support, see ways you can join your fellow person of color or member of the Black community, and see if you can actually be there for them. So like, I can reflect back to a lot of my friends in the last week have been actually messaging me, seeing how I'm doing, even telling me that they didn't realize how far back or how intense this racism is for the Black community especially. And I think that really puts into perspective people who are trying to understand and asking, hey, check me. If there's a point where I'm like saying something that is clearly incorrect, tell me, because I may not even realize it. And by learning that and understanding from your perspective, that's where things will actually change a bit more, change for themselves and change how they communicate that to other people. So that's what I would have to say. Just keep, like I can give examples where a friend, she's European, she understands that there are some forms of racism she's experienced, but also realizing that this is amplified in some other groups, right? Other marginalized groups, and asking me, hey, is this the right way to approach a situation? Is this the right way to have this conversation? I want to be a part of this movement. How do I best approach this? What is the best way to communicate my perspective, to show that I'm actually sympathizing, trying to check my privilege, trying to hit the nail on the head with some of the points that I'm trying to make, and to speak up? That's key, right? Having these conversations, especially with your friends that are from the Black community, for example, having those conversations and being able to approach the discussion in a productive way.
You know, empathy, obviously education, but even just standing in solidarity, you know, doing what's right. You know, a lot of people aren't born racist. Like, no one's born racist. So like, the fact that ideology was kind of taught, or the privilege was kind of taught in a way that people might not be able to relate to, I think the biggest thing to kind of show support to this revolution is to do your part and just doing what's right. And if that's standing in solidarity, if that's donating, if that's being silent online and educating your family members, you know, outside of the social media realm, I think there's several solutions that can be, you know, that can come out and be impactful. And I think that right now, the fact that there are so many different options for solutions is very essential for a movement like this, where if you looked at the previous movements in the past, like, they've been kind of, well, they haven't been enough, obviously, but they've also been kind of one or two dimensional. You know, they haven't really covered a lot of different avenues and global areas that, like, this movement now, this revolution that's happening now, has actually touched. And like, all 50 states in the US have probably been protesting. I believe I saw somewhere online that like there was somewhere between like eight plus countries, or I believe it's definitely more now, but at least like the global community is recognizing this movement as well. And that's just, you know, white people of color, even Black people are just understanding that like, this is wrong. We're all humans. Like, at the end of the day, if we all get buried 6 feet under, our bones are, you know, our molecular and, you know, our makeups are all very similar. We're all humans. We're all Homo sapiens. It's not a matter of skin color. It's a matter of doing what's right for humanity. And also just realizing that like the injustices that were going on for all those years are just wrong. And now that we finally have enough of a platform to kind of speak up and make a difference, I think now it's just catching like wildfire all around the world. So
I know they're having a march on June 6th, the city of London. So that's amazing to have that. That's super important. But a big thing is representation from the university. Like, I want to see, like some of the higher ups marching with us, like showing that they care, like, you know what I mean? Or even just showing their support in some way, like, seeing something from your coaches, like, you know what I mean? Sending mass emails just saying, are you guys okay? Is there anything that we could do? Whatever. Just, I feel like these issues happen and Western is just kind of like, they're not really vocal about it. And it either shows that, one, they're ignorant to what's going on, or they don't care about what's going on. So, silence speaks volumes. So I just want to be able to see, like, and it's like when issues like this happen, that you can say something and speak out or share something, and I saw something as well, like June 1st came around and Western was so quick to, post about Pride Month and that kind of stuff is showing that. So if you want to talk about political views and not being a part of that, that's something that's very, political and controversial, but you're showing your stand in that you stand with that. So, I don't see why it can't be done for multiple different things, because you've shown that you have the ability to do it. You know what I mean? It's not that they're not showing their support to anything. It's kind of like picking and choosing what they want to show their support to. So I would say going forward, like, just being more accountable as a university and understanding that you have a lot of Black students who come to your school and come to your university, and we want to feel like we're supported in these types of situations, in these issues.
First of all, we could start with, this might be a little controversial, but within Western athletics, the majority, so much of the population is Black. And I understand that football players might have a little bit more availability of funding or access to funding, but for the rest of the athletes there, to have more access to funding would be great. I know that Western does have specific funds and grants and scholarships for students of color, but there's always room for more.
Again, Western has a Department for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, so EDI. Really try to, one, bring in members from the Black community or from marginalized groups to have these conversations with them and be a part of the decision making. That's super important at an institutional level. Of course, I'm speaking about Western here, and supporting and encouraging more members of the Black community as well as other marginalized groups to actually attend Western, supporting that, and really highlighting areas where they've gone wrong. Like, that's okay. Being able to say sorry and acknowledge that a mistake has happened in the past. So I know Western has had a history of allowing, for example, a professor back in the 80s and 90s to do research on looking at how members of the Black community are less intelligent, are, again, not at the, yeah, so I don't know that in heavy detail, obviously, but I know that there's been clear systemic racism in the past within institutions, and being able to say sorry, acknowledging it, and creating avenues to better support people of color, especially Black community, is key. One thing I always say is scholarship is always important. I know Western currently does not offer any scholarship for members of the Black community, for example, or other marginalized groups directly. So being able to open those doors up might help encourage more youth to want to go to an institution such as that. For the London community, one is allowing for, again, peaceful protests, allowing us to actually have a voice and discussion. For our MP, for example, to reach out to different associations that represent these marginalized groups, having conversations with them, seeing where change needs to be made, and actually implementing those. Yeah, so it's tough unless the the discussions are being had to find areas of improvement. Again, I'm not the person who can identify where London or Western has exactly gone wrong, because I don't know the history and how far back that goes. But for them to review, bring in the right people to have these conversations with, and understanding that it's okay to say sorry and finding ways to actually make change or change that is super important.
The institutions have I think a lot more kind of groundwork to put in to create change. Just because those institutions are with elected officials, or they have responsibilities to that they were appointed to kind of continue withholding and to continue honoring their responsibilities. And as you might have saw on Twitter, like Western made their support for the Black community and stood in solidarity through everything going on. And there's alumni, there's people in London, there's people around Ontario and in Canada that don't agree, obviously, and they're vocal about their rights and freedoms and their free speech. So there's an alumni that said he would withhold and withdraw his annual alumni donation, and after Western kind of made that declaration of support and solidarity, So I think that it's a significantly larger issue for institutions, as they kind of harbor thousands and thousands of students annually that are continuing to they come into Western in hopes of gaining new knowledge to help them progress in life, and then after they're done at Western, they're kind of on to their own thing, So it's tough for an institution to kind of touch the lives of individuals that have thought a certain way their whole life, and kind of alter their perspective, I'd say. But that's also part of the issue that we have to tackle. We have to tackle this institutionalized racism, whether it happens actually in classrooms or it happens to people that are attending these classrooms, and they're kind of just not allowing change to happen. I think for the city of London, I honestly think it just comes down to kind of head up, where like the heads of all these institutions are like the mayor or like the elected officials in the city of London, or like the president, or all the deans at Western or around the community, really need to kind of sit down and collectively understand the movement and the revolution that's going on, and really kind of put into perspective collectively as to like what matters most, and like what really is needed at a school or in a city of like London or like Western first and foremost, and kind of prioritize everything that way. And obviously there'll be people that don't agree with the change, people that don't see why change is needed in the first place, but having something come from the elected officials genuinely as well, like I think there's a way that this has to be kind of genuinely expressed. I don't think you can just type on a document in 12 point font Times New Roman, just type it out and upload it online, and that would just be interpreted into the community as something that would make a difference. I really think that the elected officials and they're doing a good job. I saw Western, they, like I said, they supported the movements that are going around and advocated for equality. So steps are being made. I do kind of appreciate that, but I also feel like just being aware and of everything kind of going on, because like a lot of the times people aren't aware because it doesn't really affect them. So even like, I don't know what demographic most of the elected officials in London or around Western are, but just kind of being aware and just kind of understanding that this stuff might not relate to them directly, but the fact that they're aware of it still going on and that they're advocating for change, I just think that's the best thing that could happen, and just kind of creating policies and creating change that will prioritize what's needed first, and then kind of continue dealing with social and problems as they go. So I definitely think prioritizing and just kind of doing what's right, like the common theme of this whole thing is necessary.
I think we kind of touched on everything, you know, and it's just, again, it's a hot topic. It's in the news right now, and I just want to see that, you know, that it's still being supported kind of later on, and people are taking the time to really understand what's going on. Again, like I said, like, you don't have to be the most vocal person, but just doing something is important as well. The social media isn't everything. It's very easy to just share something and actually not care, you know. So I would rather, you know, people be doing stuff in the backgrounds and actually making moves and making changes, having those important conversations, instead of just posting something and then just because everybody else is doing it, you know. So just kind of keeping this energy. That's a big thing. But yeah, and then having conversations like this. Like, thank you for, you know, putting this together. Like, I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on here. These are more of the conversations that kind of need to happen, you know. So salute to you for sure.
I think what's kind of cool in this time period is, like I said, I brought it up a bit earlier, being in a more leadership role and kind of a sports association really put into perspective of politics, I would have to say, because we have to have conversations about how we best address this issue of racism, and clearly showing that we're against racism and being able to say that appropriately, and having conversations and hearing from other sports groups saying that we have to kind of filter ourselves to not lose position, to not lose support from obviously people in higher power that might have this might actually be racist or have are built on systemic racism. That's a really interesting perspective that I've never actually had before, being in a decision-making process. So that's why I want to encourage anyone in the Black community or people of color to really focus on finding ways to put yourself in a position to be able to make decisions that will impact not only people from your own community, but everyone as a whole. So I think that's really important to do, or at least support the people who might be in that position. I think that's really key, as well as finding those educators, finding those leaders that have a voice, have a platform, and bringing them along to really be an ally and voice. So that's been cool. And having some of the members from our league to come up to me and ask me, how can we best approach the situation? How do we show our solidarity and do it in the most effective way possible? That also ensures that our group is protected, and we can continue to do the things we do and keep our platform at a high level without these other outside unfortunate barriers that could actually knock us down. It's always a thing that we have to take in as a factor, which is wild in my opinion. But yeah, politics.
I think times like this we'll reflect on it, and you know, when even if we have kids and they ask like, what were you doing during times like this, you know, like being a part of that and just being able to share a memory of something like that is just something I'll cherish for the rest of my life, and kind of empowered me to continue, you know, advocating for change, and it just kind of motivated me to solve this issue that's been going on for so long around this world. So
this is just adding to the amount of activist work that needs to be happening